How do you resolve conflict? This week's Parsha, in Vayigash, Yehuda does something amazing. The first thing that he does is he steps up and he takes what Jocko Willink calls extreme ownership. He does something that he does not necessarily have to do, but he made a commitment to his father that he would bring Binyamin back. And so he steps up, Vayigash Yehuda steps up, and he does three things that are actually very practical and very powerful for conflict resolution. The first thing that he does is he does a recap. The first thing that he says is he sets up what the scenario is. Yosef is sitting on the throne. Yehuda approaches him and he says, let me just summarize what's been going on. Whenever two people don't see eye to eye, whenever two parties don't see eye to eye, the first step is to recap, is to summarize what has been going on in an objective way, what has been going on up until now that led us to this point. That's one. Two, so Yehuda says, my master interrogated his servants. He said, do you have a father? Do you have a brother? And we told you, we were honest with you. And then we said, our brother's dead. And he shares the conversation, he recaps the conversation. And then he says, not only that, but when you wanted us to go back and bring our brother, our father was so nervous about that. He felt this way. We understand why he felt this way, because he has one son left from his most beloved wife. And if he loses that one, he'll go into the grave in grief. So number two, what he does is in the recap, he validates the emotion. Usually you're supposed to validate the emotion of Yosef, the person you're talking to. But he validates the emotion of Yaakov. And he brings Yosef into that situation and says, wow, from this situation, this feeling, you have to validate, understand where our father's coming from, understand where we are coming from. And I get why my father's coming from that, because he's going to have a loss. Now, by the way, you and I both know that Yosef is hearing about his father. So Yosef, his interest, his relationship, his love for his father, Yehuda is actually validating this fear that very deeply also touches Yosef. So he does validation as step two. In step three, he shows that it's okay to share emotion. Here's what I love. He shares, why is this so important? Right? People shift and they open when they see that your heart and emotion is in it. It leads them to open them up. So I want to share, I'm looking down because I'm looking at a chumash here, along with some notes, but I want to share with you, here's what he says. He says, if you take this son away, and he's recapping the experience and the words of his father, if you take my second son away, Binyamin, then I will feel ripped apart again and again. And I'll feel a fatal problem has happened to me. And so Yehuda turns to Yosef and says, how can I go up to my father, knowing that his soul and his son's soul are tied together? The three steps that Yehuda did to step forward and resolve conflict, what was the outcome? That Yosef finally got off from behind the mask, from behind the throne, and started crying. He was moved to no longer have this conflict. And from that's how the brothers reunited. And in business, in life, when you resolve that conflict through these three steps, you honor their respect. Yehuda first says that he brings an openness. He says, you're my master, I'm your servant, please, Adoni. And then from that honor, he does a recap of what happened. He does a validation of someone's experience, emotional experience in that recap. And then he also shares emotion and shows vulnerability in that recap. The three steps to resolving conflict in this week's Parsha. See you next week for Parsha and Parnassa.